Good morning, students. Today we are going to read the third lecture in the topic of air, which is a subtopic of environment and atmosphere in the subject of chemistry O levels. So concentrate yourself. We are going to start now. Our today's topic, that is the first topic in the lecture, is corrosion. Corrosion is the natural deterioration or destruction of a material. So point to be noted, it is a natural deterioration or destruction of a material, metal and alloys, as a result of its interaction with the environment. The term is mostly applied to metals and particularly to their reaction with oxygen and water. If a material reacts with oxygen in the air, the corrosion is called dry corrosion. So if the material reacts with oxygen in the air in the absence of the water, then that kind of the corrosion is called dry corrosion. If a material reacts with water, the corrosion is called wet corrosion. So this is the difference between the dry and the wet corrosion. Wet corrosion generally occurs more quickly than dry corrosion. So this is another important point. Wet corrosion is more speedily occurred as compared to dry corrosion. Localized corrosion occurs on small areas of the bare metals where the whole surface is not corroded, only the small patches are corroded. That is called localized corrosion, and produces holes or cracks. So the area which is affected by the corrosion normally has the holes or the cracks. The rest of the surface remains the firm. Uniform corrosion attacks larger areas such as the roof of an aluminium pot or a copper roof. Okay, this is the total reverse of the first one, that is localized corrosion. Localized corrosion occurs at the small patches of the surface, and if the whole surface is affected by the corrosion, that is called uniform corrosion. Attacks large areas such as the roof of the aluminium pot or the copper roof. Corrosion tends to be more severe if the corrosion agent hits the metal at high speed. So this is point to be noted. If the corrosion agent hits the metal at high speed, the corrosion will be speed up. If the agent contains solid particles, so this is another important point. So if the agent contains solid particles, the corrosion is even worse and is called erosion corrosion. Generally, the higher the metal in the reactivity series, the more rapidly it is corroded. So this is very important point to be noted. You know the reactivity series which we have read in the topic of the metals. So higher the metal in the reactivity series, though the more rapidly it corrodes. Underground pipes. So this is a way to avoid the corrosion. Underground pipes have pieces of the magnesium blocks attached to them at regular intervals to prevent corrosion. So this is a way to prevent corrosion. Exam tip is here. In acid rain corrosion, the corrosion of the building involves those made of the limestone, not all other buildings. So this is very important point as far as your paper 1 is concerned. In acid rain corrosion, the buildings which are affected only made of limestone, not all the buildings. So this is very important point, and normally students make mistakes about this question. Here is a question. The diagram shows a ball of the steel wool placed inside the end of the small test tube. The test tube is inverted in beaker of the water, trapping air inside. So it means if water and air is there for the reaction with the steel wool, so definitely the rust will be occurred. So the question is, what was the level of the water after several days? So there is the air with the presence of the water. So definitely the steel wool will rust. Okay, the percentage of the oxygen in the air is 21%. That is almost 1/5 of the total proportion of the air. That is actually almost 20%. So look now, Here is the tube that is divided into 5 equal portions. So first portion, second portion, third portion, fourth portion, and the fifth portion. So when this will be rusted, all the oxygen will be used. So it means 1/5 of the air will be used, that is actually oxygen. So it means water level will rise up to D. So what was the level of the water after several days? So water level will rise up to D because 1/5 of the air will be used in rusting of the steel. So look now, D. O2 is used up in the rusting process. Exam tip is here. O2 is used up in the rusting of the steel wool. Since air contains about 21% of the O2, the air column should rise by 1/5 of the total air column. Okay, here is a very important topic that is actually involved in paper number 1 and paper number 2 as well. So some gases are here: combustion, respiration, photosynthesis, and rusting. So we are going to read the uses of some gases regarding these 4 processes. So the first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen is not used in combustion, not used in respiration, not used in photosynthesis, and not used in rusting process. Oxygen is essential for combustion. Without oxygen, combustion cannot be taken place. Oxygen is essential for respiration. We cannot live without oxygen. Oxygen is produced in photosynthesis process, and oxygen is essential in rusting process. Without oxygen, rusting will not take place. Carbon dioxide is produced when carbon compounds burn. Carbon dioxide produced in respiration process. Carbon dioxide is essential for the photosynthesis process, without which photosynthesis cannot take place. Carbon dioxide accelerates rusting but not essential. Noble gases. Noble gases are not involved in combustion, not involved in respiration, not involved in photosynthesis, and not involved in rusting. Water vapors produced when hydrogen compounds burn in combustion process. Water vapors produced in the respiration process. Water vapors are essential for the photosynthesis process, and water vapors are essential for the rusting process. The next thing that we are going to read is the proportion of the oxygen by volume in air. So you know the proportion of the oxygen in the air is 21%. So we are going to prove it through an experiment. This is actually a question related to paper number 4. So here is the apparatus. So 100 centimeter cube of the air is pushed out of this range into this range. So 100 centimeter cube of the air will be pushed out from this range to this range across the hot copper. Here is the copper which is being heated up with the Bunsen burner. Air is pressed backward and forward across the copper, which turns black. The volume of the air gets smaller and smaller. So here is the volume. Here is the measurement that can be used to measure the volume of the air. Because the oxygen in the air will be used up with the reaction of the copper, and when the copper will be reacted with the oxygen that is present in the air, the copper will turn black. So this is the finding the percentage of the oxygen in the air. So look now, this is the explanation now. The Pyrex tube is packed with small pieces of the copper. So here are the pieces of the copper. For example, pieces of the copper wire. The loosely fitting glass wool at each end of the tube prevents copper from getting into this range. So here are the tubes that prevents the copper to move into the syringe. Initially, one syringe is full of the air, that is plunger out. So that was the first figure. So look now, here is the plunger out. That is 100 centimeter cube of the air is there in the first syringe. and the other is empty, that is plunger in. The volume of the air at the beginning is noted, that is 100 centimeter cube of the air. The copper is heated strongly and the air is pushed back and forth into the syringe to syringe several times. The oxygen in the air reacts with the copper as follows. So this is the reaction by which the copper is reacting with the oxygen, and oxygen in the air is going to be used. The burner is moved from one portion of the Pyrex tube to another like this. Look here. The burner will be moved from this end to this end of the tube so that the copper is uniformly heated, and because of the uniformly heating of the copper is going to be reacted with the oxygen present in the air. So air will be used up in the syringe. Oxygen will be used up in the syringe. The burner is moved from one portion of the Pyrex tube to another. When it becomes clear that the fresh portion of the copper is not changing black, so when it will be clear that copper is no more changing into black, it means that all the oxygen is used up. The apparatus is then left to cool down and the volume of the air remaining is noted. So after noting the volume of the air, it will be clear that 1/5 of the air is less than the initial measurement of the air. The percentage of the air in the sample of the air can then be calculated by volume. In other methods, so some other methods are there also. That was the copper method. So in other methods, oxygen can also be removed from the air by the rusting of the damp steel wool, the heating of the iron fillings, burning phosphorus, and shaking air with an alkaline solution of the pyrogalol, that is benzene 1,2,3-triol. But the copper method is the most famous as far as your O-level paper is concerned. Here is a question that is related to the copper method topic. So look now, an 80 centimeter cube sample of the air is trapped in the syringe. So 80 centimeter cube of the air is trapped in the syringe. The air is slowly passed over heated iron in a tube until there is no further decrease in the volume. So air is moved backward and forward over the hot iron, so until there is no further decrease in the volume. When cooled to its original temperature, which volume of the gas remains? So look now, originally in the starting there was 80 centimeter cube of the air was present. So almost 20% of the 20% oxygen is there in the air. So 20% of the 80 will be 16. So 16 will be subtracted from this, so it will left 64. So just you find 20% of this and subtract the answer from this. So the remaining answer will be 80 minus 16 will be 64. So B option is the right one. So look now, B, the oxygen in the air is used up to oxidize the iron. So that's why 64 centimeter cube of the air will be left in this range. Here is an exam tip for you people. The remaining gas is mainly nitrogen, which forms 80% of the air, because 20% of the air, 20% of the air, that is oxygen, is being used up with the reaction of the hot iron. Here are some uses of the oxygen to make steel. So oxygen is used in making steel. It is also used in oxygen tents to treat patients in the hospital who have breathing difficulties. For example, the newly born childs are kept in the oxygen tent so that they can breathe easily. Next use is in the oxyacetylene flames in the welding and cutting. The next use is in the oxygen gas cylinders for deep sea divers and high altitude pilots and astronauts, because in the very deep sea and at the very high altitude the oxygen proportion is very less in the air. So that's why the passengers and the deep sea divers have to keep the oxygen cylinders. The next use is oxygen is used to combat pollution. Oxygen is used as a rocket fuel for the aeration of the sewage in treatment plant, for the bleaching of the paper pulp in the paper production. Oxygen masks are found in passengers aircraft to help passengers breathe when a leak occurs in an aircraft, resulting in lower air pressure so that the passengers can breathe easily. So this is normally done when there is something uneven during the air travel. Detecting carbon dioxide and water vapors in air. So this topic is again related to paper number 4 of chemistry paper. So I'm telling you again which topic is related to paper number 1, which is related to paper number 2, and which is related to paper number 4. So this is normally a question which comes in the paper number 1 and paper number 4 particularly, and less important as far as your paper number 2 is concerned. So we are going to read the detecting of the carbon dioxide and water vapors in air. So this is actually an experiment that normally comes in the alternative practical paper. So figure illustrate the apparatus which can be used. The U-tube is clean and dry. At the start of the experiment, a general stream of the air is drawn through the apparatus using a water pump. So look now, air is pushed in by using the air pump. So air will pass through this tube, that is a U-tube. Ice, water and salt mixture has been put into the beaker, and in U-tube has been placed, and when the air will pass through the U-tube, the water vapors that are present in the air will be freeze, and water droplets will be there at the bottom of the tube. And when the remaining air will pass through this tube to come into this tube, so the lime water will turn milky. So because the carbon dioxide sign is, carbon dioxide normally turns the lime water milky. So look now, here is the explanation. After about 5 to 10 minutes, droplets of the clear colorless liquid condenses in the U-tube and the lime water becomes slightly cloudy. Okay, because the carbon dioxide in the air will turn the lime water milky, and the droplets of the clear colorless liquid will be condenses in the U-tube. So this is the evidence that air contains the carbon dioxide and water vapors in the air. The positive lime water test shows that where there is some carbon dioxide in the air and droplets of the clear colorless liquid in the U-tube shows that there are water vapors also. So we have proved that the carbon dioxide and water vapors are present in the air. The next topic that we are going to read is the nitrogen. Nitrogen is used by the food industry. When foods such as nuts and bacon are processed, they need to be protected from oxygen. The reason is oxygen actually oxidizes the food and food gets spoiled in short time. Otherwise, oxygen in the air will oxidize oils in the foods to rancid products. To exclude oxygen, a stream of the nitrogen is passed over the processed foods while they are being packed. Liquid nitrogen is used when an unreactive refrigerant is needed. The food industry uses it for the fast freezing of the food because fast freezing actually keeps the food fresh for a longer time. Hospitals use it to preserve kidneys from a donor until they are transplanted into a patient. Vets use liquid nitrogen to preserve semens ready for use in the artificial insemination. They can transport the semen of a prize bull or a famous race horse around the country and use it to improve a dairy herd or a racing stable. So this is the process through which cross can be done. Preserved human semen is used in some infertility clinics. If a husband does not produce normal sperm, the semen from a donor may enable him and his wife to have the baby they want. So these are some uses of the nitrogen. Nitrogen is used when an inert atmosphere is needed. So this was the topic, students. This was the lecture number 3 in the topic of air, which is the subtopic of the atmosphere and environment. So I hope so this will be much more easier and interesting for you people to understand and learn now. So read this lecture again, understand it, learn it, and make your notes. Thank you so much.